Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial, and in this one we're going to be making one of these, which is a dumb waiter, controlled by a combination of Expresso and Python and some user data for our little buttons over here. That's what we're going to be about in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. The first thing we're going to need will be a flat plane, and I'm going to make this 200 by 200 in the width and the height. I'm going to leave it as it is, that's fine for the actual orientation. And the width and height segments I'm just going to make 3 and 3, and if we go into Garrow shading lines we can see that that's set up perfectly well. Moving on from here then, I will hit C to make it editable and select my polygon mode, and I'm going to remove the middle polygon. Select the remaining polygons and hit D for extrude, an offset of 10 and create caps. We'll check that. Apply, and we've created our first floor. It's not quite right because I'd like the center hole to be larger, so I'll switch to edge mode, UL for loop selection, and select this loop and this loop by holding down the shift, and then I'll select my scale tool, and in the Z what I'll do, I'll start to scale and then hold down my shift key and we'll just move this 120%. I'm going to do the same again, so UL and select these two loops. Just hold down the shift and select that one, and then switch back to my scale tool, and in the X hold down the shift key and again scale to 120%, and that makes the center hole the size I want it to be. I'll now create a copy by holding down my command key and dragging. Would help if I selected model mode though. Let's just do that. So we've got one of those. Hold down shift and we'll move it up by 110. May need to make an adjustment on this a little bit later, but for now that'll do. And I'm going to repeat the process, so hold down the command key, click and drag, and then move this one up 110. So that gives me 3 floors, and that's looking good. Moving on from here, we need to create the lift car, so I'll get a cube, resize this, I'll make it 110 in its height and around 80 by 80, and we'll see what we've got. Let's have a look and see if we've got something that works, and yes, we can see that that's going to work perfectly well for us. And if we go into our coordinates here and in position Y move this up 55, we should find that we're in reasonable shape. We probably need to go a little bit higher than 55, or in fact what I need to do is have a look. If I just move my plane one down by 5, that will be, I think, okay. In fact, what I'll do, I'll make it 100 actually. See what we've got there. Yeah, I don't know, no, not quite. Let's just undo that, leave it at 105. That's fine. And then the bottom plane, if I just move that down -5, it should give us what we want. Yeah, because I'm straddling the two. Yeah, that's fine. That looks good. And then if we can move the cube 110, just move it up. In fact, make it more than that. It wants to go 165 actually, so make it 165. That should put it between the two of those, and then all I've got to do is move my plane 2 down by 5, make it 215 in the height, and that's fine. That's set that up the way I want it to be. So bring the cube back to 55, and I'm also going to group the cube into a null, and I will call this lift, and this can be called car. That's fine, and then I need to make the car editable, so I'll hit C, select my polygon mode, just select my front polygon, and we can because visible only is checked, that's fine. I for insert, and I'll insert by 5, so hit apply. And we can see that the top edge of the lift is lining up with the bottom of the floor, and the same applies to the bottom edge, but in this case with the top of the floor. Moving on from here then, I'll create 2 nulls. The first I'll call Expresso, and this will receive the Expresso tag, but first I'm going to rename this one Call Buttons, and this will be requiring some user data for our control system. So I'll add user data. I'll rename it Floor. I'll also add a group and drag it out of the user data. Place Floor inside the group and rename Group Controls. And then we're ready to go. So Floor, the data type will be integer, and the interface will be radio buttons. And we need to do these kind of backwards. We'll do them as 0 will be semicolon 1, because that will be floor 1, and then 1 will be the ground floor. So ground, that will be the order that we want them in. If we just go to our example, we can see that it's perfectly good. So that's going to be set up the way we want it to be. So I can hit OK, and now we've got controls and they're ready to go. It's all set up for us. Fantastic. So moving on from here, let's get a programming tag. So come down to programming tags, Expresso, and we're ready to start work. The first thing to drag in is the car. So we'll bring this in our coordinates transform. We want position Y. We'll drag our call buttons in and come down to our controls and select floor. So that's our first 2 items in. The next thing we need is a condition node. So we'll grab a hold of one of those. So a logic condition. And this will be part of our controls for the call buttons. So they're going to be driving the switch for this. Our top input, we need to be floor 1. So that needs to be 110 because the lift needs to travel over 110. It starts at 55 and it needs to reach 165. So we must have 110 in input 2, and input 3 can be 0. We need a compare node, so we'll bring one of those in. And this is where we use some quite clever logic. What we're going to say in the function is not equal to. Okay, so we're going to compare the position Y of the car to whatever's coming out of here. And if we select the ground floor, then we'll be getting a 0. But if we select floor number 1, then it's going to be 110. So that's really important. So we're going to compare these 2 values. So if they don't match up, then we're going to get a 1 at the output, and we're going to use that 1 as a trigger. And we're going to use it as a trigger for something that's going to be going on in a Python node. So that's the all-important Python node brought in. Before we start working with this, I'm just going to bring a time node in because we will need one of those. And we need to, as always, remove the time port and add a frame port. So that's all set up and ready to go. And then the final node that we'll need will once again be the lift car. And at the input, we'll say coordinates transform position Y. And that's all we need to do. So we're now working with the all-important Python node. The first thing I'm going to do is remove all the ports. So we'll delete all of these. And then we can start to think in terms of adding new ones. So the first thing I'm going to do is add an integer, rename the port frame, and I can plumb in my frame port from my time node here. Don't worry about the yellow top. That's because there's nothing going on inside to actually relate to this at the moment. That's fine. It will sort itself out. Next thing I'm going to do is add my first float, and this will be car pos. So car underscore pos. I'll add another integer. rename this trigger. So my car position Y can be plumbed into car pos, and the output from this compare node can be plumbed into the trigger. And then the final port I need is floor pos. So that will be another float. And we'll rename that floor underscore pos. And the conditions output can be plumbed into there. Let's do a bit of rearranging so that things are a little bit tidier. Move this over a little bit further. Okay, that's great. And then we just need to sort the output from this, and that will be another float, and it will be move car. Just make that a little bigger and make our window a tad bigger and place this over here. Okay, great. So everything's looking good. Moving on from here then, we can think about working with the Python. So we can open an editor. What I'll do, I'll select script, bring this back, select the Python node and open in editor. Just move this out of the way. I'll just place it over there so that we're not in the way, but we do still need to see that later. Okay, great. We're ready to start work. I'll just remove this line. The next thing we're going to do is add some more global variables, and it was pointed out to me recently that you can put a comma after global variables in the same line, so you don't need 3 lines with global. That's quite a good way of working actually, so thanks for pointing that out. I'm not sure who pointed that out to me, but offhand I can't remember your name, but many thanks for pointing that out. It's a useful tip. So start time is going to be the first variable that I'm going to need in the globals there, and then car start pos. So they're my 3 global variables. Moving on from here, I've got my Python node selected. I need to add some user data to this Python node. So in my user data, I'll add data. Simply call it Spline. It will be, of course, a spline, and it's going to be used within a range mapper, as you've probably guessed if you've seen a few of my other tutorials. And we just need 2 points. What we'll do, I'll just twirl this open and we'll make this -25, or rather, sorry, it's 0.25, and this one will be, I think, already 0.25, and it is, so that's fine. We can hit OK. So we've got our spline set up, and we can now drag this in to the expression editor here and say spline is equal to op, and we've got our spline data in our editor there in our expression, which is great. The next thing we need to do is say if frame is equal to 0, we need to say move car is equal to, and it will be car underscore pos. So our move car here will be equal to our car's current position. That's what we're saying there. Start time will be equal to an empty list, and car start pos will also be equal to an empty list. We can then say move car underscore, or rather is equal to car pos once again. So that's fine. And then we can move on and start thinking about our main part of this, our main code. So we can say if trigger is equal to 1, and we've said that if our compare gives us a 1 here, we're going to use that as a trigger. So if our car position doesn't match up with our floor, we know that we need to move the car, and the lift button's been called to move the car, and that will create the trigger. So if trigger is equal to 1, we can then say if len car start pos is less than 1. So if there's nothing in car start pos, car start pos dot append, and it will be car position. So whatever the position the car is in, that will be the starting position for the car when there's a trigger, when this code has been triggered. If len start time is less than 1, start time dot append, and it will be frame, the current frame, as per usual. And then you'll have seen me do this code a number of times if you're familiar with my Python tutorials. So duration equals frame minus start time 0. If duration is less than or equal to 90, so we're going to do this over 90 frames or 3 seconds. That's how long we're going to take to move the lift between floors. We can then say range mapper. So range underscore mapper is equal to c4d.utils.range map, and it will be brackets duration (0, 90, comma), and then it will be car start pos brackets 0. So whatever our car's start position is, that's what we want to start with. And then we need to say floor pos. So we need to start, if our car's start position is at 0 and we've called the lift, then our floor position is where we're going to be heading for. That's going to be our destination. So that's going to be 110 in this case. And then we can simply say false, comma, spline. False because of course we're moving up and down. So we have to say false if we're going to be moving in a reverse direction. We could be moving from 110 to 0 as opposed to 0 to 110. That being the case, we must use false. Great, so that's all done. And then we can simply say move car is equal to range, or rather just one single equals range mapper underscore mapper. So this is going to move our car for us between our floors. And then to finish this off, we can simply say else car start pos dot clear start time dot clear, and that's our code complete. So there's nothing particularly clever going on here. It's mostly a range mapper combined with some logic that drives the thing. That's all it really is. There's nothing particularly spectacular about any of this. So now we're ready effectively to give this a go. But one thing I've noticed with my car, what I should have done there, I've still got that selected. I need to hit D for extrude and go -75. That needs to be done. That's better. Now we've got an open car. Don't know why I didn't do that. I should have done that earlier. But anyway, never mind. I didn't. Okay. So what we can then do is connect this to here. And in theory, it should now work. So let's get our cool buttons and we'll filter out, we'll say geometry only in playback. If we play this now, and straight away it works. Look at that, because the floor was set to 1. So if I hit ground, look at that, it works beautifully, doesn't it? And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We'll just change the colour of the car from materials, just go automatic, go into here and just give it a sort of reddish hue, just to make it a little bit more distinctive, and then run the timeline again, and let's have another go at the cool buttons. And up she goes. Yeah, it's quite nice, that. It looks really quite good, doesn't it? And it's quite funny because what you saw there was the timeline actually looped and the lift stopped and then it carried on going. So it does actually remember where it is if the timeline loops, which is quite a nice feature of it. But ideally you don't really want that, so we'll make that 1000. Just go back to the beginning and run, and then we won't get that problem. But yeah, there you go. We've got a working dumbwaiter. And that's how you do it. It's, as I say, very, very simple. Not much Python and not much Expresso. You know, you just need a few nodes to get this to go. You know, so there's your finished expression there. See if I can fit both of them on the screen. I may be able to. Yes, I can. I know I can. If I just go back to the standard view, go back into here, into there, and we just open in editor, and I can place this over here, drop this down so that you can see all the code. If I can get a hold of it, that's it. Drop that down there so you've got all of that code, and then hopefully I should be able to get this to a stage where you can see all of the Python too. And there you go. Now, or rather all of the Expresso, I should say. So there you go. There's your expressions, and that's how you do it. So yeah, not too bad at all, was it? Not too painful to actually make that work. But anyway, that's what I wanted to show you in this tutorial, how to make a dumbwaiter, and I've done that. So as always, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you've got a lot out of it, and that you can use this perhaps in some of your own projects, or maybe enhance it in some way and use it in one of your own projects. But anyway, for now, that just about wraps this one up. So if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and of course if you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel, and obviously leave a comment and ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, then please share this video, because all this good stuff helps keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, for now, that just about brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.